Thank you. Mark Samsom, I work at Cisco. Probably you know Cisco, but predominantly from a network background. So just going to explain during my presentation what networking has to do with OpenStack and what we do in OpenStack, and why I think it's an interesting development. So I just heard from Ruth, I have 10 minutes left for my presentation to meet the schedule. Let me see if the clicker works better this time. Well, yes. So you would think about Cisco as a networking company, right? Not particularly like an open source company. Well, we do some stuff in open source. We do that already for a long time on a variety of topics, not only OpenStack, but one of the most, the best examples from a recent part is Cisco acquired SourceFire. SourceFire has been very active in the open source community with contributions to intrusion prevention with their Snort code. And Cisco is also, for instance, active in collaboration and instant messaging. Well, we've contributed code for that, and you see the logo for Jabber and XMPP over there. So there are a number of areas where Cisco has been active in open source. But probably you know it's better from networking, but so why is Cisco so interested in this, right? Well, there are a number of reasons, right? We think that actually cloud, as we are here, is probably the best platform for application development. And since Cisco has this sort of like huge ambition to be #1 in IT, we probably have to step into things which are an ideal platform for also application development. We are really an infrastructure company, as you know us. We are those network guys, but we want to step up, have this ambition. To achieve this ambition, you have to also look after environments where people can develop applications. But we think with OpenStack is this real open cloud environment, and one of the things which we think that is a necessary success factor for the success of cloud is the fact that it becomes more open. So with OpenStack, we get this open cloud environment. And this open cloud environment is not only interesting for application developers, because this is where you see the interest for cloud, you see it with application development, and that's clearly because, well, you have this self-service capability, scale-up capability, the way to work independently of where you are with an environment, so you can work in develop code, test code, accept it, and directly go to production without being worried about differences between those environments. We think that cloud, and particularly OpenStack cloud, right, is very interesting for people who run their infrastructure, sysadmins, right? You don't see a lot of the people we talk to day in, day out, and we talk predominantly to people who manage infrastructure, manage networks, manage compute, manage servers, storage. It's also a very interesting environment for people who manage infrastructure. So if you are managing infrastructure, have a look at what OpenStack can bring for you, because it has a great environment, great tool set gets expanded for you as a sysadmin. Well, Cisco is also interested in cloud, since we think that cloud is the ideal platform for what we think is the ideal platform for things like Internet of Everything or Internet of Things. Internet of Things will bring us lots of data at lots of points to gather that data, make it accessible, run your application on any point, make those applications accessible. We need cloud. So we are building a cloud platform. And that cloud platform obviously runs on OpenStack. Lastly, I want to say, so this is the first two components in OpenStack. You just heard it from the first speaker. The first two components were not about networking, but then they certainly, with the contribution of Cisco and others, realized that networking is an essential part of cloud computing. And so OpenStack is a very interesting development for Cisco as a network company by genes, right? Because it has a capability of driving the network from an API point of view. So this goes well. So, lots of this. You probably have seen Cisco in the news for networking. We have been in the news for OpenStack and our contributions. The co-chair of, the vice chair of OpenStack community is Lou Tucker, a guy who works at Cisco in the cloud community. We've been working with many others to partner on making adoption of OpenStack easier, right? To run it easier. We've been working with Red Hat, we've been working with SUSE, we've been working with Canonical on stacks which are easy to deploy with OpenStack and infrastructure from Cisco. We run already for a long time OpenStack as the platform under our WebEx service, conferencing software service. So we've been doing a lot, and since yesterday we've also spoken out the intention to acquire a company called MetaCloud, who's known for managed OpenStack services. So our contributions, right? Our contributions are typically, well, our first contribution would be as a network company, would be a Neutron, right? We've been at the basis of Neutron at networking service, but networking is very related to things like scheduling. It's actually the glue in a cloud, right? Clouds is certainly, if they are distributed, you absolutely need a network to run a distributed cloud. We've been working as a server vendor very actively on the bare metal deployment service in OpenStack called Ironic. It's an ironic name, but so very actively on that sort of generic API part, and also obviously working on the plugins which you need at the bottom of those APIs to talk to our products, which are not native OpenStack, but they have strong APIs. And we have been working on plugins to adapt those APIs to OpenStack APIs. And that's particularly, obviously, in the networking part, where you know Cisco for Nexus products in data center, in virtual network services, and our server products. This goes well. So there is something changing in infrastructure, right? Infrastructure used to be, if you look from a network point of view, you used to have this sort of like nerd interface, right? You used to be, if you would be mastering a Cisco network, you needed almost like a degree, right? To master a Cisco network. You needed to know this command line to understand on how you have to put this network together. That's changing rapidly, and we started to change that, right, when we entered the data center market like almost 6 years ago with our compute product. And we were a completely new kid on the block, right? We had no legacy in compute, no nothing. And so we had to sort of rethink on how do you do servers, right? And we came up with this idea of you have not only to think about a server as a piece of infrastructure on its own, but a server as part of a system, a larger system with I/O, but also a system with an API. So you don't have to be a nerd or a wizard anymore to master a compute infrastructure. You can just talk to the API. And with this API, you got this sort of new sense of that you could declarative way of managing your infrastructure. You could just tell the infrastructure on how it's supposed to run. So we have this, what we call this, UCS is, by the way, stands for Unified Computing System. That's that server product that Cisco puts in the market 5 years ago. We put this new concept of service profiles in the market. And service profiles is just telling a way through the API is telling from an application or a sysadmin point of view, a declarative way of telling the infrastructure on how it should run. That's very sort of the way how you deal today with OpenStack, right? This was a Cisco invention, but it's very along the lines on how you think about infrastructure from an OpenStack point of view. An application can just define how the infrastructure should look like. So it has been very easy for us to adapt the way how you run from OpenStack through Ironic or from Neutron point of view, how you want this system, a UCS system, to run. But I'll talk a little bit about this idea of declarative way of managing infrastructure. Just a little bit point of those products, right? I told, here are some details. We've been with our Nexus products of family, which is data center switching, fiber channel switching, fiber channel over Ethernet switching, any kind of I/O through the network, unified I/O, like Cisco calls it. We've been working with a number of vendors, open source vendors, to build out validated designs which are easy to deploy. So you don't have to be a complete wizard on what happens in OpenStack, which distribution should I take, how do I build this. This is just a how to do I build a quick and easy stack, right? There are a number of options there, as you can see. And we've been also working on you have this new kind of infrastructure, what we call converged infrastructure, where the infrastructure exists of server, compute, networking, etc., and is designed as one. And Cisco has two sort of partnerships in that space, one with NetApp and the other one with EMC. The one with NetApp is a solution called FlexPod, and we have also been working on a solution which it has an OpenStack version of that. So FlexPod with OpenStack is a validated design which is already out there in the market for a long time. It's already in the second version. And then you have this, our cooperation with EMC, and we have been even building a new company to build converged infrastructure. And that's called converged infrastructure, we call that vBlock. It's delivered as converged infrastructure, supported as converged infrastructure, is managed as converged infrastructure. And you would say, hey, vBlock, right? That's this. I thought that was only about Cisco, EMC, and VMware, right? Well, up till today, that's still the case, right? But they will also be announcing very shortly, in a couple of months, that they will have an OpenStack version. So in open source vBlock version. So up to the next point, I just had this, well, there were lots of sort of like reports and graphs from Alan already. This one was interesting for me to look at. People look at OpenStack, why are they interested? Well, they're interested not from all sizes of companies, right? Not only big, but also small. Everybody is interested in OpenStack. But for me, it was important that it was all about open, right? It's, I think, the third. Yeah, open technology, avoiding vendor lock-in, all has to do with open characteristics of OpenStack. Today we have a lot of cloud offerings in the market, and most of those cloud offerings in the market, managed, private, public cloud, they're all not open, right? They're all about closed APIs. If you look at the biggest one, the most famous one, Amazon, doesn't really has this own set of APIs. If you look at the other competitor, Microsoft Azure, right? It's about the Azure API, right? It's the way how they manage how you can declare your environment in that cloud environment, in that cloud service from Microsoft. But for people, if they want to move in the cloud, that's a very strategic sort of way of moving. It's a very strategic way of thinking about IT and a very strategic choice for a customer to go there. Then you also want to know if you have other options. and whether you can move out of the cloud. That will become very difficult if those APIs, those way of talking to the cloud is very sort of, well, restricted, very proprietary. So open, I think, is a very key part of building cloud. So this is why Cisco is, and now has been announcing an initiative, what we call Intercloud. And we've been announcing that on a partner conference, I think in March, something around that time frame, in Las Vegas. We've said to partners, well, Cisco is going to build a cloud called Cisco Cloud Services. Actually, Cisco Cloud Services is actually a build-out of the WebEx cloud, which was already there. And as you remembered from a couple of minutes ago, the WebEx cloud was built on OpenStack. It's completely OpenStack, so it is sort of like purple, yeah, purple on the bottom. That part is completely OpenStack. Runs on Ceph storage, runs on Cisco components, but all about an OpenStack interface. And we will run all our applications, our SaaS applications, like WebEx, but also security applications, which you can get from Cisco's cloud. We will run that on that stack. But that would be not a nice sort of announcement if you would be talking to all of your partners, right? And say, we are going to run a cloud. Well, this cloud, we are just going to build how you can run that, build the blueprint, and we're just going to put that on partners, in partners' data centers. So we're going to work with our partners to build that cloud. And secondly, we're going to attach that to, this has a build-up, so I'm going to just click through. We're going to build a worldwide cloud, right, existing not only of those Cisco Cloud Services components which run in partners' data centers, and one of the ones we've announced a first partner in Australia, that was Telstra. We're going to announce 3 more in Europe of partners that are going to run Cisco Cloud Services. And next to that, we are going to connect those cloud services nodes through an open interface, an intercloud interface, to our to existing cloud services of our partners. And we're going to push a model which is based on OpenStack, not only for our own cloud services node, but also those as partners. And going to work out a manner that people can have a choice. They can have their cloud services running on a global cloud, but in a with a local partner in their own country, with their own jurisdiction, that they can be safe about where the data is, and that they don't have to go to a strange court to get the data back. So it's going to be a global cloud with local presence, with your local partner. Just a little bit about networking, because I think my time is limited. Just checking. Okay. Yeah. Actually past my time, right? Half past, right? Lots of things, we as a network vendor, we see lots of changes in networking. You will probably see lots of changes in networking, right? Data center traffic, network traffic in data center is growing significantly every year. It's like 25% compound annual growth, right? What you also see, if you would just extrapolate that over the years, you almost get sort of scared on what kind of scale we're going to. What we also see changing very much is you used to have a lot of traffic out and in the data centers, what we call north-south traffic. There was an application, and that application talked to something outside, a website talking to a customer, right? But what you now see is what new web applications like, new, more cloud-like applications, applications that scaled horizontally through data centers, virtualization, those trends, and that 80% of the traffic within a data center is not north-south anymore, but stays within the data center, is what we call east-west. So customers have been, and we have advised customers, and we are building products to do that differently, not build a sort of huge and very sort of like resilient data center core, data center network core, but build a scale-out of infrastructure, which exists of many nodes, which are completely meshed in terms of data center network connections, and that can scale up very easily because it's completely meshed and exists of many, many nodes. What you also see, obviously a couple of years ago, everything we attached and we managed to the network was physical. Well, that has changed, right? Now almost everything is virtual, and you also want to manage the virtual network connection. So we see a new edge, not only the physical edge, but also a virtual edge. And this next thing was already called out by that functions like firewalls, but any function, video, coding, etc., anything that happens in a network, right, which is network related, that gets virtualized. And that calls network function virtualization. That's also a trend, and you see also that's good that OpenStack goes into that direction as well, because as we said, right, there is this massive opportunity for application developers, but also for infrastructure, people who manage infrastructure, to have a better way of doing that through OpenStack. So new virtual edge, function virtualization. What we have to see, and that was, I think that people who started to build out Neutron a couple of years have been sort of like visionary on how the way to do it. And they have built this architecture of Neutron in a very, well, extendable way. Like there is this API layer, and that was sort of like very sort of limited in terms of functionality when they started. And they sort of let this plug-in layer. So vendors like Cisco could come in and build their plugins to connect to our equipment, but they could also extend the functionality of Neutron through sort of like plug-in extensions, right? Bring in more functionality if that functionality was not available in the API. So that's an extendable, it is an extendable concept. So that's good because that's very important if you go to want to adapt functions like virtual edge, right? If you want to have distributed firewalls, software firewalls, if you want to have new functionalities, network function virtualization, and you want to go through Neutron and declare on the state they need to be in. And thirdly, what you now, well, last component, what you see now, networking used to be this, I already explained it a little bit, this nerd place, right? You had this special kind of people. They managed the network through a very, well, difficult command line, difficult to understand. What you now get is an API, and I'll just going to tell a little bit about what we are going to do ourselves in networking. You get this notion of an API, and you can just declare of the state of the network. And you see a little sort of like the horizon view of a Neutron, a network built through Neutron, with a number of segments, so you can declare on how the network should be looking like. And that allows you to orchestrate that in terms of, well, orchestrate the network in combination with other elements like virtual machines, images, all kinds of functionality that you find back today in OpenStack. But still, if you look at the network point of view, if you want to declare that state of the network today, you still need to understand networking. You need to understand the concept of a firewall, you need to understand IP, you need to understand IP addressing schemes. You need to understand things like layer 2 versus layer 3. And what does that mean to an application developer? It doesn't mean a lot, right? It's very complex to understand and grasp the concept of networking. So I think like a year, 1.5, 2 years ago, we started to think about this new concept of how you should make this network more accessible. Because if you are going to cloud and you're going to have these cloud applications, things are going to be more distributed. We're going to things like IoT, even more distribution, right? Network needs to be a very, well, sort of like easy way to talk to from an application point of view. And if you look at an application, always starts with this sort of like whiteboard, and then people start to draw on the different components they have. They have a database, they have something which talks to end users, they have maybe some logic in there, and they start to draw arrows and they start to scale up areas, etc. It starts always in a whiteboard. During that whiteboard phase, they also start to think about how these different components have to talk to each other, what they need, what kind of security a component needs. And you could understand that the component that maintains the data has another kind of security level than the component that talks to the end user. Completely different security scheme. So we have been thinking about how do you build something which is easier, right? More logical. You don't have to think about how the network works, but more about what you want from the network in terms of services, what you want the network to do, not about how it runs and how it behaves and how the functions of the network specifically are, but more about what do you need. And so we came up with this concept of application network profile. So this is a Cisco thing, right? And that's actually, well, I talked a little bit about services profile in UCS. If you think about computing and UCS and service profiles, the way you can tell a server how to behave, this is something from an application point of view, you can tell the network on how it should behave. So you can tell, I want a security X, I want inspection of my traffic in this area, and if this component, if these functions, if these these modules, which are in the user end part, they talk to the application logic, then there could be multiple elements of application logic because I want to scale out, so maybe I need some load balancing, right? So maybe I need the network to balance my load on those areas. I need this kind of response time from the network. I need a 10 milliseconds guaranteed response time. More like that, right? And that you sort of declare in the application network profile. So what we call this is a sort of like Esperanto language in between for network and application people to understand each other. I think that's very needed if you go to distributed cloud environments. And that runs on, it runs in a virtual environment. It runs not only virtual, and then not only talk about servers in this case, bare metal servers and virtual servers, containers. It talks to all of those elements. It's independent of where it runs on, just like OpenStack is meant to function. You could even have a container. You can have a bare metal server. You can have a virtual machine. But you can also think about this can run on a bare metal network element, a switch, but it can also run on a virtual switch, or it can run on a virtual firewall or a bare metal an appliance, like we call it. And you can get in an application style, so you put in this profile into the network, but you also want to understand on how the network runs. Right? What it does with your application traffic. Today, that's very difficult. You again need to go to this network wizard, ask him a difficult question. He starts to look very sort of like strange to you and says, well, what do you mean? Which port? Tell me which port you want me to look at. No, I just want you to look at my application. In which segment is that application? So there is a complete non-understanding between those two functions. So what we also want to network, and that's very easily to, in OpenStack they have a concept of ceilometer. That's my timer. And that's 5 minutes timer, right? Good, thank you. So I have 5 minutes to start. We also want a network to report back. Tell you what it did with your application, right? tell you how much latency you have in this application logic segment, how much loss of traffic you have in the web front-end part. So you want to have a network not only, not talk in VLANs and routers and all of that, but you want to have an application point of view from the network. Yeah. And this is something we are going to work, we have been working on this for data center networking, obviously. But with the extensions of network into new areas, right? Today we are here probably all IT people, right? But there are many, many other technical people out there who work in operational technology environments. People who work in oil platforms, or work in railways, or work on other machinery. And they have their own networks, and their own data, and their own way of managing. So Cisco is obviously, with our future of Internet of Everything, we try to connect those environments to the IT environment, so that IT and OT become one, right? And then we get to this concept of Internet of Things and Internet of Everything. So we also want to declare how the network should be running, not only the data center, but also across the LAN, across the WAN, into the operational environments. So this should be a profile which can be extended to other environments. That's also an interesting area for OpenStack, maybe. And on the same day we announced this, right? We call this ACI, Application-Centric Infrastructure. There was a talk from Lew Tucker, I think in Hong Kong, if I'm correct, and he started to talk about extending Neutron with a new concept called Group Policy API. And actually the Group Policy API is actually the same kind of way of thinking like we think about application-centric networking. So this could be a huge step for OpenStack, right? To make it easier to talk to the infrastructure, to talk to the network from an application point of view. Tell the network what you want. Tell the network what kind of latency you need, what kind of security do I need. Today, that's not the case. If you talk today to application people, they have no clue because it's all too complicated. And if we really want to, go in the operational environment, we want to extend the cloud to everywhere, we really need to take this step. So there's more, that's what I want to say. There's more on this. We have a breakout this afternoon. If you're interested, you want to learn about this, pay a visit to our breakout in the afternoon. And I think that's my last slide. Yeah, thank you.